Hello friends, it's Jacob, and welcome to this full-length painting demonstration. I've got something pretty unique and different for you today. So let's take a look at the reference photo we're going to be working with. By the way, there is a link for you to be able to download this photo yourself, the high resolution version, and you can try to attempt this painting for yourself, and I encourage you to do so. So we've got a nice, well, I'm calling this a nocturne, which just means a nighttime scene, but this is really an early morning scene from Bandon, Oregon. It's a misty, drizzly morning, and I was walking down the street going to the beach, and I just was captivated by this bright orange street light casting this glow onto the asphalt, and how much that stands out from everything around it. So I really want this to be the focal point of the painting, and conveniently enough, you can see that all the shapes in the painting are kind of pointing to this glow and to the street light. The trees come down this way, the trees on the right come down like this, the power lines go like that. Even the glow itself points to this light. The way that the road curves like this kind of hints at pointing to this light. Same with the road here. Everything is kind of directing your eye to this focal point, which already stands out quite a bit on its own because it's so bright and the color is so much warmer than everything around it. So scenes like this can seem extremely intimidating to paint at first, but it's actually not as hard as you think. It's really not that much different than painting any other scene in watercolor. We're still going to work from lightest to darkest value, and we're still going to try to find that big connected middle value shape. The only difference is the lightest value in this scene is going to be quite a bit darker than the lightest value would be in a typical daytime scene. So the whole tone of the scene is brought way down, or the value is brought way, way down, except for that light. And that is going to be what makes this light here really just pop, is that everything around it is just going to be so much darker. So this light and the glow from that light on the asphalt are going to pop and shine, giving us that really nice contrast and sense of atmosphere. And I really do want to capture that sense of misty, hazy, drizzly atmosphere. And there's a few tricks that I'm going to show you about how to capture that. Most importantly, painting wet into wet, which gives us nice, fuzzy, flowy shapes. So a lot of this painting is going to be done wet into wet. So, plan of action. First thing I need to do is paint in that orange glow. Here, here, a little bit here on the grass, and there's a little bit of that glow showing in the trees here, here, and here. It's kind of hard to see if you're just looking at the paper photo that I have here for you, but if you download the full resolution photo, you'll be able to see all of the details. There's actually quite a bit of detail in the trees that you can see. And we've got this kind of orange haze right here. The water particles in the air are reflecting that orange glow. So then we've got other kinds of reflections happening on the asphalt from the sky, the cool gray sky. We've got some spots of that sky showing through the trees. So first thing we do is establish that orange glow, and then we're gonna start painting in the lightest values, which are just essentially everything that is the value of the sky. We're gonna kind of tone the paper with this grayish color, and then we're gonna start painting the mass of the trees and the grass, darker reflections in the asphalt. And then the very last step, the darks, which in this case are going to be extremely dark, we're going to save that for the shadows in the trees. There actually are shadows happening in the trees. It's hard to see, but there are shadows. and then the tree trunks. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump right in. Before we do that, I'll just quickly go over all of the colors I have on my palette. This is just a little travel palette. It's very lightweight. I use it for plein air painting, but I also like to use it in the studio. It's got different areas for mixing. So we've got white gouache, which, by the way, the power pole, I'm going to save that for very last, and I'm going to use gouache to paint that. I'm not going to try to paint around that shape. It's just too difficult, too small. So gouache, white gouache, Payne's gray, which is going to be very helpful for us in this painting to really get everything as dark as we need to. We really, really need to push the darks a lot farther than we normally would. Ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, turquoise, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, teal, or cobalt teal blue, however you want to say it, lavender, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, which is same as lemon yellow, similar. Then we've got pyrrole red, quinacridone red, and pyrrole orange. I would prefer the orange to be closer to the yellow, but that's just kind of how things happened on my palette because I added an extra red after I already had everything set. So most of this painting is going to be cool colors. A lot of Payne's gray, like I said, a lot of ultramarine blue, a lot of burnt umber, burnt sienna to get those nice grays. We mix those with these blues to get gray. And that's pretty much it. I got a simple sketch already ready to go. I didn't bother showing you how I did this sketch because there was really not much to it at all. So, in order to get everything ready, I need to prepare my paper, which is Saunders Waterford cold pressed paper. This came in a full-size sheet or a half sheet, which I ripped down into 4 11 by 15 sheets, which is my favorite size to work in. And this is absolutely excellent watercolor paper. So I'm going to use my kneaded eraser, and I am going to roll it over the line work, the pencil work. This is going to lift up any excess graphite, and it's going to help eliminate smudging when I wet the paper down with my sponge. So I'm pressing into the paper pretty firmly when I do this. I mean, I really don't have to do this for this painting because it's going to be so dark that you wouldn't see smudging anyway, but it's a habit, so I'm just going to do it. Okay. Now, the next step is I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to wet the paper down on both sides. By the way, just off camera over here, I have a little rag, just a washcloth. I use this to control the wetness of my brush. And then I also have this little bucket of water. So just gonna get a little bit of water in that sponge, and how I like to do it is I drip some water first over the surface of the paper. And then I'll just move that water around with the sponge. I'm not squeezing the sponge, I'm just moving the water around. That's already on the paper. Squeeze the sponge out, wipe off some of that excess water, Don't want it to be absolutely soaking wet. Just thoroughly damp. Now I'm going to flip the paper over, do the same thing on the back side. So the reason I do this is so that the paper gets wet as evenly as possible. It also infuses more water into the paper, which gives me more time to work wet into wet, which is very important, especially in the first phase of the painting. And then also, as you'll see, the paper will lay flat without me having to tape it down, which is nice. I think that should be fine. This also, getting it wet as evenly as possible prevents warping and rippling. Okay, so remembering my plan of action, I need to get that warm glow from that street light in there. I'm going to clear off some space on my palette. I'll be right there. We can save this rag for other things, this paper towel. I'm not very good at talking, in case you haven't noticed. I call things the wrong thing and I trip over my words. So I'm better at painting than talking. Hopefully what I'm saying will make some sense to you. So we're going to get this Pyrrole orange. It's just a super intense color. We're going to drop some yellow ochre into that. We'll drop some of that Pyrrole red in there too. Why not? More orange. Yeah, a little of that color goes a very long way. I'm not actually sure how long I'm going to keep it on my palette. It's so intense. Let's get some cadmium yellow in there too. That's better. I'm trying to capture that kind of sodium lamp color. So I'm going to paint around the light itself. At least try to. Leave a little circle of pure white right there. And then I'm just going to let that glow kind of spread out like that. Paint a little bit of that glow up into the sky. Just a little bit, not too much. Painting in a circular motion, these little arcs. Let's grab some more yellow ochre. Gonna wipe my brush on that rag, get some of that excess paint on there. Just drop some of that onto the grass area here. Basically anywhere where I see this orange glow, I'm just dropping that on. Just splotches of color. There's no precision in this stage of the painting. These are just big splotches of color. All right, where else do I see that glow? There's a little bit right here on the trees on the left side. There's even some of it happening on the grass right there, just a tiny bit. Then that glow happening on the street. Beautiful color. There's a little bit that leaks over here. Something about like that, I think, would do the trick. Okay. I think that will do it for the glow. Let me just wash off my brush. Make sure I get all of that red out. Using this big quill brush, Synthetic Squirrel from Winsor & Newton. I just picked it up at Blick. It's a great brush. It holds a ton of water. A ton of water. So you have to be really thorough when you're washing off these kinds of brushes. So let's see. How do I want to mix my gray? Let's do ultramarine blue for our blue, and then we'll do burnt sienna for the warm color. Ultramarine blue is a more reddish blue, and then burnt sienna is basically just an earthy red. So these two colors combined make a really nice gray. I'm going to make the sky quite a bit darker than I normally would. I really want to capture that moody, early morning, misty atmosphere. And I'm probably going to push the values a little bit darker than they are in the photo. I want it to make it look a little darker. And if you get some splatters on your paper, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. That's all going to get painted over, and it's just going to add to the interest of the scene. So I got a nice, healthy, thick mixture of gray, and we're just going to start dropping that into the sky. Yeah, see how dark that is? That's nice. And I'm painting in these kind of crisscross motions with the brush. Paint right through those trees. Those trees are going to be much darker than this sky. Remember, this sky is the lightest value of the scene except for the street light. So everything else is going to be significantly darker than the sky. It might look dark right now, but once we put all the other colors on there in context, you'll see what I mean. And I'm going to slightly warm up that gray as it comes down towards the horizon. Paint into the cooler gray, giving us something of a transition. Adding progressively more of that burnt sienna into the gray mix as I get lower. So I'm going to paint around this glow like that. You see how that warm color is still showing from underneath that gray that I painted over top of it? It's because watercolor is transparent. At least this version of watercolor that I'm painting with. So you can kind of see through all of the layers of paint and they all have this glow to them. So before I get too much farther, I need to smooth out that gradient for that glow. Just a little bit with this clean damp brush. I'm just kind of scrubbing into it. Again, most of this is going to get painted over. By the way, I'm using fresh or mostly fresh paint for this out of the tube. If you want really dark or rich values, you have to use fresh paint. It's going to make your life just so much easier than trying to mess around with dry paint. Yeah, so I'm just toning the paper, getting rid of the white, setting the stage for everything that comes after this. Using a slightly cooler gray for that street now. Painting around that glow right there. Warm that gray up just a little bit as the road comes into the foreground. Starting to hint at some of the texture right here just by painting some of that gray into the glow. Feel free to pause the video or re-watch any section if you need more time, or if you didn't quite catch something that I said. Yeah, we'll just tone this whole area with kind of a warm grayish color, and that'll help that green that I paint over it later not be so vibrant. I could have just toned this straight with green, but I don't really want there to be much green in this scene. All right. So now we've gotten rid of the white of the paper. So if you look at the reference photo, you'll notice that there's kind of a lighter area of the road right here, and then it gets darker on this side. See that? It's because you've got a reflection from the trees darkening up the left side of the road. So there's a really cool thing I can do to kind of imitate that, which is lifting paint up. And I think I'll be able to pull that off. There's a few different ways you can lift up paint. The best way to do it is usually just with a damp brush that's clean. You have to make sure that it's clean. Otherwise, it's going to be muddy. You can use a paper towel, a damp paper towel, but you have to be very careful with that because you can damage the paper if you press too hard. So let me just see, because if the paint is too wet when you try to do this, it can be tricky. And if it's too dry, it's just not going to work at all. So I think I can, yeah. So with every swipe of the brush, I'm going to rinse it off and then get it mostly dry so that it's just damp. See, you can start to see that the less paint is lifted up, the more paint that the brush picks up, if that makes sense. This is just one of those really subtle details that makes for an excellent painting. Not just a good painting, but an excellent one. This kind of attention to detail. And see, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm just firmly pressing into the paper and lifting up paint. There's nothing to it. Got a little splatter right there. So you got to watch for that. It's not the end of the world, but let's see. Yeah, that's going to get painted over anyway, so that actually doesn't matter at all. And I think I want this part of the road also to be a little lighter than how I have it, so I can just do that. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's so easy. Got another splatter. Gotta be careful about that. Then you'll get that little bloom. See how it's kind of blooming out? It's because the water is pushing the paint away from it as the water spreads out. So again, that doesn't really matter because this is all going to get painted over. But it's just something to be aware of. Okay. And then there is a brighter spot right here in the middle of that reflected light. So I want to see if I can do the same thing. Just like that. I wonder if I can even get back that bright streetlight glow. Yeah, kind of worked. Most likely I will fill in this area at the very end with gouache. But, I mean, that looks pretty good right now, don't you think? This is going to be a really cool painting. I'm pretty excited about it. So, we have now established the general mood of this scene, which is very moody, I would say. So, now it's time to start thinking about next steps. Everything is extremely wet right now, which is what I want. I want to be able to work wet into wet. So now I have to make a decision as to what I'm going to paint next. And I think I'm going to start here in the road. So I'm going to get out my trusty Escoda Perla, and I need to get a new one because the point on this one is starting to go. But this brush has lasted me years, and you can do just about everything with this one brush. It's fantastic. It's a little expensive, but it is absolutely worth it. Escoda Perla Sintetico. Don't remember what size this is. So we're going to start establishing some of those darker textures on this side of the road while things are still damp. Then we're going to go up into the trees, around the back, and then back up to the trees on around the light pole, and then we're going to continue painting the trees on the right hand side. And in fact, well, I'm going to paint the trees, I think, with this brush. It's a little bigger. It's an Escoda 12. But for the smaller details on the road, I think I'm going to use this smaller brush. So just going to mix up some nice dark grays with a thick mixture of paint, not too much water in it. Just burnt umber, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. Those are going to be the most common colors in this painting by far, if you haven't figured that out already. So And the reason I'm starting to paint this while things are still wet is you see how soft those edges are, how fuzzy the shape is that I'm painting. That will really help sell the illusion that the street is wet, that the surface is wet. Let me move my chair out of the way here. I like to paint standing up if I can because it's easier to get a nice angle between your brush and the paper, but it does get tiring after a while. So this is a fairly thick mixture of paint. What I mean is that there's not that much water in this mixture, which is important for painting wet into wet. If there's too much water in the mixture, well, you saw what happened right there with that bloom. The same thing is going to happen with the paint. It's going to start to push things around and you're going to get these blooms, which aren't necessarily a bad thing, but it can sometimes be an unwanted feature. Yeah, this is really selling the illusion that there's kind of standing water on the road. Okay. So now there's this like area of dirt and grass right there, so I'm just dropping some burnt sienna into this gray mix, warm it up a little bit. Now for the trees. Let me get out that bigger brush. I'm not going to put any green into these trees, I've decided, not the ones on the left. Green has a way of drawing your eye to it. And I don't necessarily want your eye to stay right there. I want it to go there. Just add some random texture into the ground. We got trunks. I'm going to paint those later. So I'm just kind of blocking in the general mass of these trees. Just one big shape. There's some darker stuff happening there too. towards the edge of the shape. I'm kind of just hinting at the shape of the canopy. All that stuff kind of just recedes off into the background. So we'll make that gray even bluer. Now it's basically just a dark blue. I need to darken up a few areas on the surface of the road, just a little bit. See if I can do that. So just mixing up a warm gray and I need it to be a fairly light wash, not nearly as dark as what I just did. I'm very lightly just brushing over the surface of the paper. This is just helping to establish some texture in the surface of the road. Get that brush out again, that clean damp brush. And we can just smooth this out a little bit. Okay. Looking good so far, I would say. I actually am going to put just a tiny bit of green right here, that grass. And then there's a little bit of grass back here. But it's a very blue green, so it's not going to draw too much attention. Because even though everything is super dark in this scene, I still want there to be some variety of color. Went a little too high with that grass color there, so just scrubbed it off. And see how we have that orange underpainting right there? It's automatically making this grass color warmer. I didn't have to do anything to it from a mixing aspect. Okay, and the top edge of the road is right there. Things are still fuzzy and bleeding up a little bit, and that is totally fine. It helps everything's look and stay kind of loose feeling. Okay, we're off to a pretty good start. Yeah, if things start to bleed a little too much, well, you can just clean off your brush, get it damp, and then just lift up. All right, let's switch back to that bigger brush here. So now, these are the background trees, and then they transition into the trees that are behind this street light, where we've got that orange glow happening. So, how are we gonna do this here? So I just mixed up the same gray color that we've been using, and I dropped some Purell orange in there. It's actually giving us a really interesting kind of purpley color. Kind of orange purple, which is not a color I've ever seen before, so that's kind of cool. And honestly didn't know that color existed, but there it is right there. Okay, so the base of these trees are going to be pretty dark. And then as I get towards that circle of light, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop right there. Paint around it. And I'm going to paint just the very top of the canopy. I'm kind of leaving a circle around the street light. Paint a little more towards it. Just close the circle a little bit more. Now watch this. Gonna take a clean damp brush, and I'm going to do this. I'm gonna just scrub into that circle, the border of the circle. And now we have our glow. We just made the glow of a streetlight. And just keep lifting up paint until it looks the way you want it to. I want this glow to be quite dramatic, so I'm kind of exaggerating the effect a little bit. Make sure to clean your brush off quite frequently when you're doing this. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little more on the top. Okay, perfect. So with watercolor, you really have to think a few steps ahead at all times. Because I had planned on doing that from the very start. And you have to do it that way because of the layering aspect of it, and you can't really change things that much once the paint is on the paper. I mean, you can modify it a little bit, as you've been seeing me do with lifting up paint and stuff, but there's limits to how much you can get away with changing things. This is just the color of all the stuff happening behind the trees. It goes out like that. Okay. So just going to continue painting these trees. Basically just using the same color as the trees on the left. I'm going to need to get some more ultramarine blue. I hope you can kind of start to see how this is going to end up coming together in the end. So I'm not going to introduce green into the trees until about right there, I think. We'll see. Loving those soft shapes at the edge of the canopy. Looks so nice. It just looks like a misty day, doesn't it? Wet into wet is one of the most magical aspects of watercolor, I think. You really can't get that effect with any other medium. You can probably try to imitate it, but it's just not the same. It's going to look like an imitation. It's a bush right there. I'm going to make that a little more vibrant green to bring it forward, so I'm going to paint around that. Yeah, maybe right about there I'll start dropping some cad yellow into that gray mix. Leaving some holes in the sky. or holes through which you can see the sky through the trees. Now remember, I'm going to be painting into all of this again with a much darker mix once everything is a lot more dry than it is now. It's going to get even darker than this. That's one thing I really struggled with before when I would try to paint rainy scenes like this, is making things dark enough. And one of the things that helped me the most was starting to use fresh paint. Honestly, it just helps so much. It's so much easier than trying to mess around with dry paint. Some of those sky holes ended up closing up on me over here, so I'm just going to add some over here because the paper's a little bit drier. You kind of just got to work with what the watercolor wants to do sometimes. It really forces you to not be too attached to the outcome. I mean, you can definitely learn to control the watercolor with practice, but at the end of the day, it kind of has a mind of its own, and that's totally fine. It's part of what makes it so magical to work with. It really teaches you to surrender and to just let go. Maybe start hinting at some of those tree trunks right there. And there's this really dark shadow on the ground right there. Paint around that bush. That shadow stops right about there. I'm going to give that a spray with the spray bottle because I don't want a hard edge for that shadow. I'm going to be using that spray bottle later to get a nice kind of rainy effect, and you'll see exactly how that works. It's pretty cool, actually. I kind of accidentally discovered it doing a painting a few weeks ago. It literally makes it look like there's rain falling. So just some very subtle grayed down, toned down green. I just mixed some cad yellow into that gray mixture I had. That'll give us a nice subtle green. Painting around those little posts that have fallen down. I thought that was kind of a cool little detail to add. See how this area of the paper is now dry, so I'm getting hard edges when I paint. There's a mosquito biting my foot. We just cannot get rid of the mosquitoes this year. It's been raining so much here in Arizona, and it's January, and we still have mosquitoes everywhere. It just hasn't been cold enough to kill them off. It's really testing my focus. Just adding some dirt color. I'm just going to add some texture to this road right here with some dry brushing. Just letting the brush skip across the surface of the paper like that. Very subtle effect. Painting that bush right here, which is it's probably the most vibrant green that we have other than this grass. But that will really help bring that shape forward. Not too vibrant. So if it's looking too vibrant, I can use a red to tone it down. Maybe a little more vibrant than that. That's fine. Painting around these little posts again. Just taking a look at the painting, standing back from it, seeing how things are coming along. It's looking good so far. Of course, it doesn't look quite right yet, but it's not surprising. We're We still have a whole other step to go. I need to start adding in my darks now. So, yeah, there's some dark reflections here and here, or darker areas of these reflections, and I'm going to go ahead and start dropping those in. Just get some Payne's Gray, ultramarine blue. Actually, it might be a little too dark. Just get a slightly watered down version of that mix. So I'm just painting in the darker areas of these reflections. Painting some of those little rivulets you see, those little squiggly marks. This is a very, very light wash of paint that I'm using for this part. Just kind of drawing in some perspective lines with that clean, damp brush. It's barely noticeable, but it does make a difference. And adding back in some of those darker details. So just dropped in the shadow for the edge of the pavement right there, giving it some thickness. Okay, let's see. I want the reflection to be a little more rich in color, so I'm going to glaze over it some of that Purell orange. And smoothing out that middle section with clean damp brush, just like before. Okay, so let's do something. I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm just going to give a little spritz over the whole painting. And these little droplets of water are going to push the paint away from themselves just a little bit. And hopefully we'll get what look like tiny little raindrops. We just gotta let it sit for a minute. Yeah, there you go. See? You can see a little speckle effect happening. Might be kind of hard to see with the glare. So I need to let this sit and dry up for a few minutes, and then I will be right back, and we'll continue on with the darks, and we'll be pretty close to being done. Okay, I think things are dry enough now that I can start working on these darks. Before I do that though, I do want to darken up this grass just a little bit. So just drop some cadmium yellow into that really dark gray mixture I had, and that should do the trick. Okay. So let's work in the darks on the trees to the left first. Really thick paint. It's the same colors I've been using, just darker and thicker paint. A little bit of Payne's Gray. So let's see, let's get those trunks in there. They're fuzzing a little bit, but that's fine. Get the bigger brush out again. Even darker. Things are still slightly damp, which is what I want. So you'll see that once I finish darkening up this area, it's going to bring this entire clump of trees forward. Kind of refining the detail around the edge of that canopy. Okay, we'll leave that as it is for now. I'm gonna have to come back and glaze over some of the areas right there to make things fit a little better. But you see how this immediately established another plane in the painting? How by adding in all these darks, this clump of trees is now much closer to us. And this shape here is pushed way into the background. So we'll just drop in these trunks. We're gonna do the same thing again. As we approach that halo, we're gonna stop painting and then we're gonna scrub into it, just like we did before. And that is gonna push the contrast of that light, that ring of light, so much. It's gonna make it really pop out. And there you go. Nice little ring of light. Just painting some of these smaller trunks here and there. Roughly following the reference photo, but not too worried about it. Yeah, I'm gonna need to darken up that area right behind the trunks a little more, but I'm gonna wait till everything is dry to do that. Paint around that lighter bush right there, preserve that lighter color. Just keep darkening things up. Drop some trunks into that little sky hole. Kind of gently tapping at the top of the shape of the canopy. We'll add in the shadows for this bush here. Just adding some texture for the leaves in that bush. I'm going to darken up the bottom even more. Just straight Payne's gray. Darken up this shadow here too, actually. Okay, I might push the darks even a little farther in some areas of this stand of trees here. But I think I'm going to leave it where it is for now. Okay, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to add some final touches. I think this grass needs to be darker still, so I'm going to glaze over that again. I need to glaze over this area here, and then I need to drop in that light pole. While I'm talking about it, I can add in the shadow for this little box here. And let's see, darken up some of the areas right here even more before it's too dry. You just got to keep pushing the darks until it looks right. Just keep working at it. If you're thinking about giving up like I just did, just take a minute. Kind of take stock of where you're at and see if you can do anything to make the painting better. And I just realized if I push the darks just a little more in a few areas, everything will look a lot better, because it's just looking a little, something's not looking quite right yet. But I think I can save it. I'm just kind of adding in little extra bits of texture on the road where I think it needs it. See how we just created kind of reflection right there by painting around that area in a darker color. That's such a cool detail, those squiggles. That looks so cool. I love that. I think that looks really good. This all needs to be darker right here. So you can use some dry brushing, give it even more texture, kind of that asphalty texture. Yeah, that grass really needs to be darker. I can especially see that now that I've darkened up the road next to it. But as long as I wait till it to dry to do that, I don't think it'll be an issue. So let me just get that rain texture back, see if this works. It's kind of layers upon layers of rain texture. Let's see, just give it a second. Maybe more. There you go. See that? All right, so just let that sit for a minute. Let those droplets kind of spread out a bit. And then I'm going to get the blow dryer out so we can speed this up, dry everything off completely, and then there's a few areas that I need to darken up. And you'll see why that needs to happen once I actually do it. Then we will drop in the light pole with gouache. I have not decided yet if I'm going to paint the power lines. Probably not. Oh, and then I guess before we do any of that, I need to darken up these little posts. They're standing out a little too much. See if that works. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay, get out the blow dryer. Okay, now that that's dry, we can kind of get a better feel for what's actually going on. Yeah, so let me darken up this grass in the foreground before I do anything else. Sometimes it's just hard to get the value right, especially when everything is so dark. I really try to avoid layering so many times if I can, but in a scene like this, sometimes it's just unavoidable, and that's fine. That should be good. Yeah, that's better. That is much, much better. Yeah, that looks more like it should. This all needs to be darker. Something about like that should be good. Just adding a little tiny bit of texture in this patch of grass that's being lit by that street light. I just grabbed that kind of dusty green and dropped it into that purell orange mixture. Just giving this grass a little bit more texture. Also going to darken up these patches of dirt. So just grab some burnt umber, darken that up a little bit with some ultramarine blue. I don't want too dark of a wash, so I'll go like that. Leave out some little patches close to the road, making it look like little wet patches. So I'm just taking a look at it, seeing if I need to do anything else. Well, I think it's time to use that gouache. Take some pure white gouache. We're going to drop it right here. Just like that. I'm going to take some more of that. Let's see if we can get some sparkles. So I'm using the side of my brush, and I'm very lightly scrubbing over the surface of the paper. It's a fairly dry mixture of gouache. Okay, now let's drop in that utility pole. Mix that into that kind of gray color. Doesn't need to be pure white for this. Just like that. Get that little highlight back on top of the box. Like that. Maybe add a random highlight here or there. Just like stuff on the side of the road, mailboxes and whatnot. Signs. Just barely hinting at there's more detail happening there. All right. Let's see, how risky do I want to get? I'm thinking about lifting up some paint in the trees, kind of right here. Just like that. I want a little bit of a misty thing going on. Okay. Let's see, what else? Anything else? Some lighter patches of dirt in the grass. I'm just using that same color that I used to paint the utility pole in gouache. Okay, well, I don't really want to do too much more than that. I think it looks pretty good as it is. So I'm going to let this dry completely, and then we'll take a look at it and see how we did. Okay, well, here is the finished result. So I'm pretty happy with it. I was able to salvage it more than I thought I would be able to. So yeah, overall, not too bad. I hope that you learned a lot, and I hope that you had fun. If you attempted to paint this scene, great job. It's not an easy one by any means. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you being here and your support, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one.